Good evening, everybody. My name is Aharon from Freedivers. We are at the moment based in Eilat. I teach all levels of ADA courses from instructor to 2-star. I also specialize basically in training people of high level for either records, either national or international. On top of that, we have our little evening programs from time to time. We try and do them every 2 weeks. Sometimes there is a gap, or sometimes we change a day. So first of all, I have to begin with an apology to you all that we had to change today. With regard to the nearby future, one thing that I'd like to put in now, that I am going to Mexico from the 20th of October until the 22nd of November. During that time, unfortunately, I will not be able to do a webinar. I will be training people in Baja California in Mexico. However, I hope to keep up my remote coaching with the people that I already have. So there should be no worries concerning that. We have a remote coaching program that has had a remarkable degree of success, where we provide individual counseling for people, not just handing them out a ready-made plan. It's based on the fact that we talk together on Skype. I get a clear picture of you, your history in the water, where you want to go, and what's stopping you at the moment. And then together we make a plan to bring you forward and overcome present obstacles. At the moment it seems to be working very well indeed. It's open to everybody. The price for a month's coaching is €180. And thereafter, months after that, we may reduce the price considerably, because my workload decreases as I know you better. An awful lot of the first month is involved with getting to know you, and that's collecting an awful lot of information, maybe looking through an awful lot of videos that you've got, and understanding as much as I can about what your particular challenges are. Okay, that's for somebody who wants a personal trainer. It could be also somebody who has a particular problem and wants to overcome it. Now, today's topic, we're going to begin with a question by Mark. Mark is a local diver. We have in Eilat a sunken missile boat that's sitting on the bottom in 24 meters of depth.
Right.
It's a wreck. The mast of the missile boat rises to within 10 meters of the surface. The superstructure, the deck is at about 17 to 18 meters depth. The superstructure rises a little bit above that. That's a picture of the wreck. Mark says that while diving on the wreck, he was getting very irregular equalization. That's to say, there were times when he had no problem getting down to 23, 24 meters, and then suddenly he would have problems getting, he would meet problems even at 10 meters. He said he had a GoPro on, and when reviewing the footage from the GoPro, he heard some rather weird noises on the dives where he was equalizing. He thought he might be passing to Valsalva. Actually, my first look, the thing is that this is guesswork, Mark. I don't really have sufficient information. I haven't seen the video footage. Even if I had, unless I was there with you and could ask you questions immediately after the dive, I can only do a pretty wild guess. My guess would be that you're going down, looking downwards, looking at the wreck. This is very common when diving on that wreck, because it's got a lot of nasty things sticking out that if you're not looking at it, you can hit your head on. That is not the best position for equalization. Very often, that will open your epiglottis. When somebody is doing a rescue on scuba from depth of an unconscious person, they put their head back so that air will freely come out of the lungs. When you're doing CPR on somebody, the first thing that they tell you is put the head of the patient back so that you're not inflating the stomach, but you are actually putting air into the lungs. Message here is, can open the epiglottis. If that happens to you, then you're going to lose the air that you have in your mouth, most probably. Because don't forget, your mouth is going to be deeper than your lungs. So the air tends to go up freely in a head down position and flow back into your lungs. The noises that you heard may have been effort to equalize on the fact that you never had any air in your mouth at all. If you don't have any air in your mouth, the Frenzel technique doesn't work. It's based on the idea of having some air in the mouth. Not a mouthful, but at least some air in the mouth. If you don't have that, that's basically called swallowing your air. And if you have swallowed your air, you can expect weird noises, difficulty in equalization, or impossible equalization. That's a blind guess, but I checked that one out first. I haven't seen the video. The way the camera is looking, if the camera was mounted on you, which isn't clear from what you said, you can see which way it was pointing. And that'll give you the information. But in my experience, an awful lot of freedivers freediving on a wreck tend to look down towards the bottom. They tend to look the way they're going, which of course from a freediving and equalization point of view is not the best idea in the world. If you're going down on a wreck, it's probably a very good idea, but checks and balances here. In other words, what you probably need to do if you're diving on a wreck is from time to time give a glance in the direction in which you're going, and make sure after you've given a glance in the direction in which you're going that check to see that you have air in your mouth. At depths up to 24 meters, it shouldn't be any problem at all to bring air back into the mouth if you've lost it, provided you don't leave it too late. Okay, that, Mark, I'm afraid is the best answer I can give you at the moment. Check out those things. If you have a different opinion, and if you're pretty sure that what I said isn't the answer, do get in touch with me privately, and I'll be delighted to answer you on that one. Okay, now we've got a couple of other matters. I've done the last two webinars, which I'm owe a lot of people a big apology for. Because in the first case, I did a webinar of about an hour and 40 minutes, and it was basically on a subject that is very topical for competition divers, and that is trachea squeeze, trachea lung squeeze. Due to my ineptness on a computer, we managed to lose something like an hour of the first broadcast.
Luckily we're pharmaceutical.
I'm coming to that, thank you. It was a question of me not understanding fully the functions of a computer. Please take into account I'm a dinosaur. I wasn't brought up in the computer age, and so I'm going to make 101 different excuses. Fact is, we lost the first hour. The second time I tried to compensate for this, and I lost probably half an hour of the beginning. It's a very topical and very popular subject, so at some stage of the program I'm going to have to be addressing the loss of that again, which may bore the pants out of the people who actually saw the webinar live. We now think that we've got a solution for that problem, and we hope very much that that won't reoccur. So my apologies to you. What we intend to do is I intend to put pen to paper and write more or less everything that I said on the first part of that was missing. Basically, in big terms, without going into it in huge detail at this stage, the main cause of trachea squeeze in a single word is stress. That's at the end of a chain of a whole lot of other things. The things that produce the stress are incorrect training, and if we backtrack even more, that means to say incorrect equalization technique, incorrect refill, incorrect approach to inurement, to pressure at depth, getting the body used to pressure, getting the body used to breath hold under pressure, etc., etc. So it's a question of, in training, putting all those pieces together systematically in a cohesive and intelligent, in a gradual fashion, and so that you get the body to adapt correctly to what you're asking it to do. Lung squeeze or trachea squeeze are absolutely avoidable. They are not an inherent part of deep diving. Unfortunately, when I was in Dahab on the last visit, there were a lot of people there who mistakenly believed that lung squeeze was an absolutely unavoidable part of deep diving, and one just gone on with it and maybe rested for a day and went back and increased one's dive the next time one was in the water. If you go on getting lung squeezes, I can guarantee to you that you will build up enough scar tissue that in a fairly short period of time your diving career will be finished. Because then every single time that you go into the water and you dive over about 20 meters, and there are plenty of people in the world today who can back this up because it's happened to them. They've gone from 70 meters, including a couple of, including at least one lady in Dahab, to 20 meters and can barely pass that today on a good day. Reason, if you like it, congenital lung squeeze. This is avoidable, and I really feel that from a safety point of view, I don't want to hide any techniques, I don't want to hide any knowledge I have on this, and I really want to give my 2 cents worth into the diving community to try and stop this thing happening. It's pretty ugly when we see it in competition, people coming to the surface and coughing blood. It does nothing for our sport, it does nothing for the athletes themselves, and as I say, it's avoidable. So I will be writing about that one. So please look out for that. If you have any particular questions on that, I would really like to hear them. Going on to a completely different subject. I have been asked I get asked about my opinion on training for pool disciplines. Ouch. My opinion on this is that there are two ways to go here. You first of all have to make a decision when you're training in the pool, whether you're using the pool to train for depth, to prepare, like winter training. I'm doing everything that I can in the pool in order to help me when I'm going to wherever in summer or autumn to dive in warmer water and do actual depth work. Or whether I am totally fixated on pool competitions and want to give everything in that particular direction. There are two different patterns of training. Let's be clear on this. If you want to train for the pool, it's very specific, whether it's dynamic no fins, or whether it's dynamic with fins, or whether we're talking about static training for a static competition. If you're training for freediving, the pattern that we recommend is completely different and may be a waste of time for the person who is training specifically for pool competition. Now, if you are training only for pool competition, will that help you for your depth training? Not that much. We are now beginning to understand from competitions that happen every year that there are a lot of people in Europe. A few years ago there were maybe 1 or 2 people who passed in dynamic apnea 200 meters. Now my guess is that we're getting into the tens of people in that league. Very often these people come to depth training and think that they can get a very high number in depth in a matter of 10 days or slightly more, 10 or 12 days depth training. The answer is usually no, and it usually has fairly disastrous consequences. Depth training is specific. The body has to get used to pressure. You don't have all the equalization refill challenges that you have in pool competition that you have in depth. So first of all, a decision has to be made, which way am I going? It's very, very hard, particularly in the upper echelons, to dance at 2 weddings here. Sorry, 1 second, water. I'm losing my voice. That Russian vodka is good. Okay. Back to business here. I have been asked specifically about training for basically CO2 exercises. During my period in freediving, we actually invented some CO2 tables of our own about 20 years ago. We modified also some CO2 tables that were taken from Umberto Pellizzari's Apnea Academy. We have heard of numerous CO2 tables and tried quite a few of them, some of them absolutely insane. Since then, Basically, one fundamental pattern has emerged from this, and this is the thing that I'd really like you to understand. We have a saying: in order to progress, you need stress. But stress does not make progress. What makes progress is the body's adaptation to that particular level of stress. If it's too much, the body says, whoop, I'm not playing. That's too big for me. If it's too little, this is not racist, but it turns into a Mexican donkey. I have got some experience with them. So I will tell you that if a Mexican donkey doesn't want to go, he doesn't go. You can light a fire under his backside. I haven't tried it, but I have heard of it done. Mexican donkey will fry there before he moves. They are very, very stubborn people.
If they don't move, call Solomon. If they don't move, call Solomon.
So they also have a great deal of my admiration. There are some politicians in the world who could take an example from them, but we won't get into that one. However, here's the thing. It's a balance between too little stress and too much stress. And how do we know? Well, eventually, if you're doing too much stress, you hit a wall and you probably even start going backwards. If it's too little stress, the progress will be infinitesimal, if at all. You're stuck at the same number. Okay, those are the two extremes. What happens in between? There's the rub, as Shakespeare would have said. Now, we have found that the wise heads of freediving who have come in and made all sorts of wild guesses are probably very intelligent young people, but hundreds or more of years of yoga practice in India seem to have produced a better understanding of inurement to CO2. So here we go. One of the things that we recommend most highly for this is a yogic exercise called Anuloma Viloma. Anuloma Viloma is basically long inhalation, long exhalation. If you are trained in yoga, you will use one of the pranayama postures for this exercise, which I'm going to mention: Padmasana, Vajrasana, Virasana. Well, Siddhasana is only supposed to be for celibates, but we'll leave that alone. And Baddha Konasana. However, for the rest of the unenlightened, including myself, some of these, because of knee problems today, your knees have to be on the floor. The one thing that's common to all of them, your knees have to be on the floor and your spine has to be absolutely straight. Okay, for a lot of us who are not trained yogis, this is pretty inaccessible. In India, a reliable teacher will only teach you the exercise that I'm going to tell you about when you can sit for at least half an hour in one of the 5 chosen postures. And that's only the beginning of the story. So, what I recommend to you is this. Lie on a yoga mat on the floor, not on your bed, on a hard surface, with a book about 7 centimeters thick under your head. You may find that it's necessary to have a book that is slightly thicker than that under your head, and one that is about 5 centimeters under your shoulder blades.
Or a foam brick for yoga.
Yoga bricks may work, but they're usually a bit high. I suggest that you have your knees slightly bent and approximately shoulder width apart. I have something here. I doubt whether we'll be able to see the scale exactly, which might well do.
The size.
Yeah, of, for, if you like it, a pillow for the head. This is everything to get the head, the neck, the spine in a good line. If we have our knees slightly bent, we are reducing the curvature in the lower lumbar area. Okay, here we go. When in this posture, we breathe in as slowly as we can. I won't exaggerate now, but you can be breathing in for a very, very long time. You breathe out, yeah, as slowly as you can. But here's the ticket. Not at the expense of the quality of the breath. What I mean is, if you breathe in very slowly, out very slowly, if the next inhalation is rough or jerky, like you're too hungry for air, then I'm sorry, you've gone too far. You've done it too slowly for your capability at the moment. Do not worry about the proportion of inhalation to exhalation. Do not think that you're doing it better if you're insisting on the exhalation being twice the inhalation. Forget that. Keep it natural. In India, what they do is they take a little piece of paper, usually a little piece of silver foil, or in the old days a feather on the end of a thread, and they suspend it in front of your nose and mouth, and they feel at what distance the air is felt from the nose and mouth. And it's done by counting finger widths. So in other words, they say the closer the air is to that can be felt to the face, the shorter the breath is, which means you're doing it better and better. It means it's barely perceptible. Now, you have to think of a few things with this exercise. If you are paying attention, that, of course, all the time there is a buildup of CO2 with this, if you're doing it. But the body, during the course of the exercise, adapts to this. You may find that an inhalation-exhalation cycle at the beginning of your exercise, which at first will only be 15 breaths, you may find it's 10 seconds in, 10 seconds out. Okay? At the end of the exercise, the proportions may change by themselves drastically, and you may be slowing down the breath. So, what is actually happening here? This is the important thing. Your heartbeat is connected to your breathing. That's slowing. Your whole metabolic rate is slowing down. Yeah? You're working on the whole process. And if you bear in mind your checks and balances, which are the quality of the breath, You're managing the stress levels that we talked about at the beginning perfectly. So the body is continually adapting to higher levels of CO2. Hey, isn't that what we want to achieve? And what we're not really achieving with most of our CO2 tables. This is an incredibly intelligent exercise. And actually, you don't need to do more than that. A few little tips here. You begin with only, let's say, 15 breaths. You start your stopwatch at the beginning of the first inhalation, and you stop it at the end of the 15th exhalation. Then you write down that number in your diary with the date, and any little comments that you have to make, like the number, breath number 5 or breath number 6 was a bit rough, so had to speed up from 8, 9, and then it began to find its own rhythm towards 10, 11, 12. Write down your comments. They're very important. Write down what you felt. Everything. Now, here's a tip for counting, because you can lose count. How many breaths was there? Where does the mind go during all of this? The mind should stay with the breath. But the mind can wander. The mind is an unruly beast, particularly at first. So here's a pretty foolproof way of counting. It's the way that the yogis count. The creases in the finger. 1, 2, 3. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And what do you know? I got another hand here. So on it goes. Alina's having a chuckle. All right, I'm getting threatened now. Okay, so that's a good way of counting. Difficult to lose count on that one. So in other words, you've got a count of 24 if you're using both hands. Nice. So you've just got to count how many hands did I finish by the end of it if you're getting up into high numbers. Each practice, you add 1 breath. So today I'm going to do 15 breaths. Tomorrow I'm going to do 16 breaths. Write it down all the time. How many breaths, how long the whole thing took you. Do not try to time each breath. Don't do that. That's counterproductive. Now you should work up to something like 30 breaths at the end of about a couple of weeks, 2 weeks, if it goes smoothly. In India, when we were doing it with a master, Maria Teresa was pregnant at the time, 8 months pregnant, so we went at her speed. And after 2 months, we were doing 60 breaths an hour and keeping that up. They recommend in India, before you even start the digital pranayamas, a very good teacher will say, listen, do this, do Aloma Viloma, for 5 months. You will be astounded what just that exercise will do to your breath hold. The body is familiar with adapting to CO2. Your next challenge will be preserving lucidity. This is where we keep our mind and how we train our mind. That's a completely different webinar. It's probably one of the big questions. Everybody looks at trachea squeeze. They realize it's stress, for instance. Let me backtrack to that one. They do not realize how much mental training plays a part in this game. The same thing with static competition, with dynamic competition, with everything else. It's a huge, mental exercise plays a huge part of it. You don't have to sit there and stare for 3 hours at a candle flame or at your between your eyebrows. There are sane methods that are available to us all of mental controls that are specific for freediving. They're easy and they produce results. And in another webinar or on one of my less frequent written tirades on the blog, I will happily get into that one. I've got touched a couple of parts in my blog on mental training, but they are really, really, really just scratching the surface. They're beginner's stuff. I need to get into this one, I see, a little bit more seriously. Right, that is regard to the exercise Anuloma Viloma. It's a superb exercise for CO2 inurement, and it does an awful lot of other things for you as well. Is it necessary to do CO2 tables as well? I don't think so. I really don't see the value of doing both. And if I had to choose one or the other, there's no question of which way I would go here. I think that's all on that subject for the moment. I'm just going to check and see whether we've got any questions come in. Any questions coming in? How many have we got present at the moment? How many present at the moment? Okay. Right. Other things that have come up which are really more for beginners. Yeah. A lot of beginners are struggling with understanding how to do a frenzel technique. The thing that I would like to convey to you, I tried to do a little bit of talk around that on the webinar. I haven't been able to allot enough time to it or to be able to do a full session systematically on how to do a good frenzel technique. It's not complicated to teach. It's not complicated to teach yourself. We will be doing a video on this subject that we will be posting on YouTube. I think it'll be a better platform for this, where we can go into the whole thing in detail, the do's and don'ts of that one. So many people are getting into absolute panic about, oh, my epiglottis, wait a minute, is it closed or open? Wait a minute, my soft palate, is it closed or open or neutral? Which should be neutral, the epiglottis or the soft palate? Look, guys, you don't even have to think about any of that stuff. You really don't. Yeah. This whole thing about having to uncouple them and all the rest of it. Basically, if you have a simplistic approach, it happens by itself. You don't have to do all kinds of gymnastics and with the throat and with everything else in order to get there. It is actually terribly simple to get there. We'll be doing a video. If you follow the video, you've got it. There will be tips on what I call the don'ts. The don'ts are very obvious beginners things. Don't look down the line. Check to see from time to time whether you actually have some air in your mouth or whether you've swallowed it. do not swallow underwater. Ada, bless their hearts, have created a certain amount of confusion in their exams by listing the things that will help you equalize, and they list swallowing. Ouch. Swallowing does not help you equalize underwater. It's actually absolutely wrong and will cause you to stop equalizing. If you want to I suppose that what they're trying to say is that swallowing on the surface after to unstick a eustachian tube might help. But this needs to be clarified a little bit more in their program. There's a lot of do's and don'ts in this thing. There are a lot of tips that have not been thrown in. There are a lot of reasons why people are struggling desperately with equalization, thinking that they have malformation of the eustachian tubes, a deviated septum, all kinds of other nonsense. Well, you need a very, very deviated septum before it stopped you equalizing. And I don't know how much, and anyway, that would have to be pretty extreme, because I've seen people with extremely deviated septums who had no problem equalizing whatsoever. Now, on the other hand, and I do want to click onto this one. I think I mentioned it before, but I keep on getting questions on this, so I'm going on to this one. The guy has said, look, I've looked in the mirror, I've opened my mouth, I've equalized, I've seen the way my tongue is behaving, and it's doing exactly what your tongue is doing, and I'm having a problem with one ear after X meters. Nearly every single time, the problem is diet. It's usually, nearly 100% of the time, food allergy. Either lactose intolerance or gluten intolerance. I think I've explained this before, that if you go to a doctor and you have allergy tests, he'll probably test you for about 40 different things. It's very rare that you're allergic to only 2 or 3 things. Usually you're allergic to a whole mess of them. Now, one girl approached me in the dive club that we sometimes work with yesterday, and described to me an equalization problem that was very obviously to me a food allergy problem. And I started to tell her about this, and somebody else interrupted me and said, look, I know her very well. She doesn't have any food allergy problem. She eats a lot of cheese, a lot of milk, and everything else, and she never has an attack. I said, what do you mean by an attack? Oh, well, she doesn't have an allergic attack. Well, what we mean by an allergy problem in freediving is something way underneath an allergic attack, where she's dragged off to hospital not being able to breathe. We're not talking about somebody who has an allergy to seafood or peanuts or something where they're likely to choke to death on the floor. What we're talking about here is difficulties in equalization. It's many, many degrees under what he mistakenly thought I was talking about. Here is the ticket with this. Food allergy can make the mucus heavy, sticky, thick. If that happens, you get a sticky eustachian tube. that at a certain point doesn't want to open. Or it can be making a lot of noises while trying to do it. Or more and more you get one ear equalizing, the other not equalizing. An awful lot of this can be food allergies. It can be either gluten, which is found in nearly all grains, or it can be milk products, and I mean all milk products. No, I'm sorry, yogurt is not accepted from this. No, I'm sorry, cottage cheese is not accepted from this. All of these can cause enough food allergy that you're going to find it very difficult or impossible to equalize. So my guess is, if you're finding a difficulty like this and you're pretty convinced that your technique is good, before a diving period, cut out for a week or 10 days first milk products and see if that solves the problem. If it does, you don't have to look any further. All you have to look for is how much you want to make your own compromises with that. Say, well, I only dive deeply in July and August, so the rest of the year I can go ahead with it. Well, okay. Or you can say, look, this is my sport, my life. I can live without that stuff. Each person makes their own particular compromises with the devil, so to speak. Wheat may be more of a problem for some people. Grains. And we even have to say that brown rice is not free from gluten. And if you are gluten intolerant, it's going to have the same effect. One of the signs is that if we sleep on our side at night, usually the upper nostril is free. And the other one, the lower nostril, is a little bit more constricted, or totally constricted. Now, when we wake up, do we wake up to a total imbalance where one nostril, we can breathe through fine, and the other nostril we can't breathe through at all? This is a pretty good indication that something is very wrong with your diet, guys. So think about this. This is all the ebb and flow of mucus in the body and its consistency. Obviously, the clearer, the lighter the mucus is, the more successful your equalizations are going to be. And we have to, we might think very carefully about that, because some people who think that, it's all about physiology, and some people have apparently eustachian tubes that you could put your fist through, and there are some people that you have eustachian tubes that you couldn't put a needle through. In a lot of cases, the congestion in the eustachian tube certainly can be altered by a considerable amount merely by altering our diet. So there we go, play around with that one. So we will be, as I say, doing a video in which we give, hopefully, as much as I can and as much as I can remember, the full story for people who are just beginning to experiment with the Frenzel technique. I stress again that when we get into areas of the cheek fill, etc., we do not use the tongue or even recommend it. The type of equalizations that we go in for resemble a little bit in brief terms that are not, it's not too exact, doing a hands-free, i.e. day-to-day equalization with a nose clip and full mouth. It's not exactly that, but it gives a sort of clue into which direction we're thinking. Our technique of equalization has proved extremely effective at depth. Again, I go back on this for the main reason that an awful lot of people, when it comes to really deep diving, are not capable of uncoupling their soft palate and their epiglottis reliably and consistently. And so comes a time, particularly when the body begins to record pressure, that they are actually swallowing their air. And that's usually the end of equalization and the possible beginning of lung squeeze, when they're trying violently to recover totally empty mouth. So we'll be dealing with those ones. We hope to be publishing quite a few videos when I come back from Mexico, doing quite a few videos over the space of the winter on basic techniques and also for you guys on advanced techniques. Putting it all together is something else. There's no such thing as a training program that is the set piece, the score for everybody. Training programs are very, very individual things, and learning how to mix, match, and train to overcome your particular obstacles, your particular challenges, are what a trainer should be all about. Which brings us full circle to the story of our remote coaching program, which I am pushing, I admit, because I think it's a good program. And more than anything else, I would really be happy if it helped some people get over this hurdle of repetitive lung squeeze and trachea squeezes, and set them on a path to much improved results. We've been getting some fairly astonishing results, both in the pool and in depth. I'll try and give you more in coming webinars. In general, our general philosophy and approach to this thing, particularly we haven't dealt really with pool training at all. There are some things where I would have to come out and say opposed to the conventional wisdom as it is today. Other things that we go along with it, and other things where we have to say that there are what works for one person doesn't work for the neighbor. So there are no ideal programs. But we can give some suggestions, and I hope helpful suggestions in that particular direction as well. So I want to thank you for listening tonight. I would really appreciate to hear suggested subjects that you'd like to hear about. I want you to be interested. I want you to be engaged. The whole object of the webinars at the beginning was that it should be a conversation, and an interaction between us, and not just a monologue by me. This can get pretty boring. So please send in any questions, send in any suggestions you like. Here's another thing for you, a little thought. There are no stupid questions. There can be stupid answers, but there are no stupid questions. So please, don't be ashamed of asking a question. It can be anonymous. If you don't want to expose your own identity to that, we will keep it sacred. In the meantime, I want to thank you very much for participating. We've had a lot of positive comeback on what we've been doing so far. We're very grateful for that. We're very grateful for the people who listen to us regularly. I'd like to wish you all great success in your diving, and above all, really to enjoy it and to share with others our love and our enjoyment of the sea. And one final message from me: wherever we can, wherever we can, whenever we can, even if it's only talking to friends, even if it's only pressing a like button on the Facebook, support preservation of our oceans and seas. They are being threatened in a million different directions at the moment. We, above all, are the people who love and are in the sea and are the closest thing to being part of the sea. Years ago, I was pulled into shark research, studying sharks. People who first tried to do this tried to do it on scuba, and they found that they couldn't get near the sharks on the whole because of the noise that the bubbles made. Then people tried rebreathers, and that was marginally more successful, if at all. And then people went back to doing what they had been doing at the beginning, and doing it free diving, and lo and behold, they started to get very close to the animals, very close to them, without a negative reaction, for the one reason that the animal picked up that your pulse drops in the water as well. You are then part of the ocean. You're another free diving mammal. And it happens to all of us. These are the wonderful reflexes that we were born with. This is our heritage. This should be our love. This is the joy we share with everybody. Share not only the joy, but share your caring for this wonderful environment of ours, so that our children and our grandchildren will have the privilege of seeing what we can still see today. With that thought, I wish you wonderful and safe diving, a happy Halloween, and well, I'm afraid I'll have to wish happy Thanksgiving, Hanukkah to people. I will be back in Israel on the 22nd. I haven't set the date of a coming webinar of November, sorry. Haven't set yet the date of the next webinar, but I will be posting it. Thank you very much for watching. Good night to all of you.
The 27th.
Where's the shut off button on this thing?